The dawn unsettled the sky above Winterfell in a palette of iron gray and smoldering rose, as though even the heavens sensed the tremor of change beneath their ancient span. Jon Snow stood upon the battlements in a hush broken only by soft wind and distant caw of rook. The stones beneath his boots rhymed with a thin veil of frost that lingered far into the northern summer. A breath fluttered white at his lips, half a visible, half a forgotten, as he watched the slow unfurling of banners along the outer wall. Direwolf for House Stark, Kraken for House Greyjoy. Two sigils that old songs insisted would never share a rampart. Yet there they were, cloth and thread stirring together, as if trying to memorize one another's dance upon the same chill air. He felt the weight of ghosts. His father Eddard, silent in judgment. Robb, crimson with battle and the memory of a crown that shattered. Ygritte, whose laughter had been a hearthfire in the snow. They murmured somewhere behind his eyes, but Jon kept himself moored to the present by the rough edge of the stone parapet, fingers curled against lichen and cold. Below, the courtyard stirred with measured purpose. Smiths hammered at ship nails in place of sword rivets. Carpenters bent green pine and seasoned oak into curves that resembled the ribs of some slumbering leviathan. Winterfell, landlocked for 1,000 years, smelled suddenly of tar and salt. A relay of stable boys led horses through the gatehouse, hooves clop-clopping across the wet cobbles. The smell of hay mingled with the sea-braid perfumes borne north in the holds of iron-borne longships. Spices from the summer islands, resinous incense from Corth, sacks of coarse Myrish flax for sailcloth. Farmers' wives half hid behind barrels, staring as iron-born women strode through the yard unhelmed, their dark braids tied with cords of beaten copper. It was not fear in the air, Jon realized, but bewilderment, a pivot of history so sharp it left folk blinking. Behind him footsteps approached, padded and certain. "You rise early, Your Grace." Davos Seaworth halted a pace off, folding sea-scarred hands. "Or perhaps you never slept." Jon exhaled, a quiet laugh unsuited to celebration day. "Perhaps." The Onion Knight's gaze traced the banners. "When I was a smuggler, I'd have wagered all my stolen onions that a kraken would fly over Winterfell, only on the day the wall melted. Then we had best pray the wall stays frozen," Jon said, though the jest wore thin beneath his own thoughts. He watched a pair of Greyjoy oarsmen stack barrels near the armory door, guided by Glover men in stark cloaks. Their conversation overlapped in accents as different as peat and brine, yet no steel was drawn, no blows exchanged. It felt less like a miracle than a stern gamble with the gods. Behind the castle, the godswood brooded in ready green silence. That too would change by nightfall. The words of the old gods would mingle with those of the drowned god, and a marriage would be sealed upon the weirwood's gaze. Jon had insisted the vows be spoken beneath the heart tree. Asha Greyjoy had laughed, saying she would wed him atop a mast if it pleased him, so long as no septon slurred a new chain about her neck. They compromised on the open godswood, its dark soil soft with pine needles and old snowmelt. Its great white face carved long before krakens ever dreamt of raiding the neck. The north would witness. The Iron Islands would bear witness. The world would tilt, however slightly, on the point of their joined blades. "Have you broken fast?" Davos asked. Jon shook his head. "Not yet." "Come then. You'll need strength." "Lords do not walk to their own wedding sup," Davos said, flashing the grin of a man who remembered what it was to dodge war galleys in moonless straits. Jon let himself be led from the cold. They passed through the archway that led toward the great hall, its doors flung open to admit raw morning. Within, the rushes were newly strewn, the trestle tables scoured and scrubbed with lemon water and northern thyme, until the oak gleamed pale as honeycomb. Servants hurried to and fro, balancing trenchers of river trout steeped in butter and fennel, loaves plaited like rigging ropes, crocks of goat cheese dusted in pine ash. Jon's stomach clenched not from hunger, but from the vertigo of expectation. Far above, the carved rafters nodded into wolves' heads and crows' wings, ancient wood smelling of smoke from 100 winter feasts. Those skull-hewn beams whispered stories of stark-eyed kings, of broken oaths, and the ruin that followed. He wondered what they might say of him. The bastard prince who would wed a reaver's daughter beneath their gaze. At the high table, Sansa sat poised in a gown so pale a blue it could have been cut from the dawn outside, her red gold hair coiled like a queen's coronet. She scanned a parchment, seating orders, virtually a battle map, marking the gaps where alliances were still tenuous. Beside her, Lady Lyanne Mormont spoke with the stiff authority of someone thrice her years, pointing to names she deemed dangerously close or insultingly far. Jon caught the whiff of salted fish and realized a dozen ironborn captains stood in a clot beyond the hearth, boots leaving damp, dark prints on the rushes as they argued in low, percussive voices. Glover Bannerman drifted near the door, eyes narrowed, reminding themselves this alliance bore the Stark banner now. Sansa looked up, her smile quick but searching. "Asha awaits you in the glass garden," she said. "She's instructed the gardeners to flood the troughs. Says she misses the sea." A dry quirk of the mouth. Sansa still weighed each jest, unsure how far she might honor the prickly humor of her soon-to-be sister. Jon thanked her and moved on, but not before noting the scroll peeking from beneath Sansa's cuff. A raven from the Vale, or perhaps White Harbor. His new union rippled across the kingdoms already, stirring maesters to scratch hurried letters in the small hours. He crossed the yard again, boots striking stone in deliberate rhythm. The glass garden was a warm jewel amid the encroaching chill, its panes misted by the collision of summer inside and northern air without. He stepped through, letting the wooden door sigh shut behind him, and tasted humidity laced with earth. Ferns brushed his knees, fat rose hips drooped low, and a single lemon tree clung to life in the corner, its fruit pale as moons. Under the lattice vaulting, Asha Greyjoy leaned against a stone trough filled to the brim, trailing a hand through water that shimmered with fractured light. Her hair, black as wet iron, was woven into a rope and pinned by a shard of driftwood carved into a kraken's beak. She wore no gown, only breeches of dark sailcloth and a white linen shirt unlaced at the throat. She looked like a storm made flesh, reckless and utterly centered. "Thought I'd find you brooding over ravens," she said by way of greeting. "Too many ravens these days. I prefer quieter company." Jon approached, catching the faint scent of sea salt that clung to her always, as though the drowned god breathed against her skin. She flicked water at him. "Then you chose the wrong wife." He brushed droplets from his sleeve. "Did I?" Asha's smile was crooked as a squall. "We'll see." She sobered, studying him. "Have you counted how many lords mutter into their cups at the thought of this wedding?" "I hear them. Hear them, but you know why? Not the old hatreds, lad. Those die eventually, with blade or with drink." She tapped her chest. "It's fear. They're afraid of what we might build together." Jon watched ripples chase themselves across the trough. "A northern fleet. A kingdom that looks outward." Her voice dropped, almost reverent. "Ice and salt in one helm. No man afloat could match us. The Starks command land, the Krakens rule tides. Between us we could sew a seam round Westeros, so tight even dragons would choke." "Dragons are ash," Jon reminded her. But he had felt fire on his face once, far beyond the wall, and the memory never cooled. Asha, unbothered, shrugged. "Ash blows on the wind. Ships sail in it." He reached for her hand under the water, feeling the cool lap against his knuckles. Her fingers slid into his, strong and calloused where rope met skin. A hush settled over them. Beyond the garden glass, someone struck a drum, practice for the processional, and its thump echoed like a distant heart. Jon imagined that pulse traveling northward, southward, along every shoreline, stirring hidden coves where ironborn captains sharpened ambition as keenly as axes. "I will not be a distant husband," he said, "nor a figure carved of ice while you raid the summer sea." She tilted her head. "Then come with me. Share the deck. Taste the brine that makes men mad for it." Benderu. He thought of Winterfell's hearths, of Stark bones buried deep, of vows pledged to gods that had no altars on salt water. Yet he also pictured wind in dark sails, the creak of mast, and the joy of speed unbridled by roads, and it sparked something younger than duty in his chest. The North will not steer itself. The North will follow you if you lead. Asha squeezed his fingers. And if you lead from the prow, they'll learn the shape of ocean soon enough. They stood thus, silent negotiation passing in the tick of light across water. Outside, the drumbeats gathered companions, pipes, a dull note of horn, and people began to fill the courtyard like rivers meeting tide. The day moved. The ceremony unfolded beneath the boughs of the ancient heart tree, its white bark mottled by centuries. The red leaves hung motionless, as if the old gods held their breath. Ironborn and Northerners formed twin crescents before the lovers. Jon wore simple black trimmed in gray fur. Asha, a vest of scaled leather the color of storm clouds, fastened by clasps wrought as tiny krakens. Between them lay two swords on a block of pale weirwood. Longclaw, Valyrian steel, reborn with a wolf's head pommel, and Night Viper, a lean blade of old sea-forged iron, whose grip was wrapped in eel skin. The weapons were angled so their tips nearly touched, a herald of unity more potent than rings. Arya stepped forward first, her feet soundless on the grass. She bore Longclaw and placed it in Jon's outstretched hands. She did not smile. Her eyes were endless gray, offering her brother this weight with the same solemnity she would offer a blade to the headsman. Then Theon Greyjoy limped to the block with stiff grace, lifted Night Viper, his sister's blade, and offered it to Asha. His certain fear of the North's judgment flickered in every taut muscle, yet when she met his gaze, she nodded once, and something in him unclenched. Asha pressed Night Viper's flat against her palm until blood welled. Jon mirrored her with Longclaw. The weirwood watched, silent witness to red droplets falling upon its roots. Davos spoke for the old gods, voice rough as shingle. No septon words, no maester scroll. Only the vows the North remembered and the Iron Islands mocked. That husband and wife should be two halves of a single shield. When the vows ended, Asha smudged her blood across Jon's cheek. He did the same to her, marking her brow. The crowd inhaled one breath together as if they might share its cost. From the fringes came Melissa Manderley's voice. Soft, amazed. Behold the blood tide. She murmured, naming what no poet yet had coined. The forging of ice and salt in flesh. The words rippled through the gathering. Somewhere a wolf howled, sharp and lonely. As dusk seeped like wine through the sky, torches were lit along the walls. The great hall erupted in applause, then music. Asha drank pale ale from a clay horn, spilling half down her chin, and roared at the fiddlers to strike up a salt reaver's reel. Sansa had arranged minstrels from White Harbor, but Asha's shout drew forth a bearded ironborn drummer instead, who hammered a rhythm that set teeth rattling in their skulls. Northern ladies blinked at the unfamiliar cadence, then found themselves clapping, skirts swirling as they mimed rowing benches and knotted sails. Roose Reswell and Harrion Karstark exchanged raised brows, yet they too took partners onto the floor when called. What began as one culture pressing warily against another melted into laughter and spinning limbs. Jon drank sparingly, feeling the world pivot like a ship turning on a tide. Faces blurred. Lord Wyman Manderley downing cups faster than a sellsword's knife, Gilly rocking little Sam near the dais, Sir Brienne towering above a knot of shield maidens, laughing, her blue eyes crinkling in rare delight. Off at the edge, Maester Wolkan and a wizened ironborn priest of the drowned god exchanged scrolls the way spies traded secrets. Through it all, Ghost prowled, white as new snow, nose twitching at the mingled scents of grease-roasted boar and eel pie. At the high table, Asha planted a boot on her bench, tossed back another gulp, and sprang onto the wood with leonine ease. "Hear me, sea dogs and ice wolves," she cried, silencing the hall. There was a queen of salt named Nymeria. A cheer rose from Dornish mouths at the lower end of the table. A deputation from Sunspear had come, curious to glimpse a new power. And she led her people across the sunset sea to carve a realm with oars and wit. But I say, Nymeria sails again tonight, though her hair be black and her crown of ice. Cups slammed tables, Asha reached down, hauled Jon up beside her, ignoring his startled protest. "Behold your king of snow and surf. He'll not sit idle while the winds yowl." She swept an arm toward the doors. There lie his fields, vast, blue, endless. A kingdom of currents. And we, his fleet. "Fleet!" roared voices soaked in mead. Jon felt the hall sway like a deck in heavy swell. He half smiled despite the churn in his veins, because something in Asha's thunder had struck true. A yearning he had never named. Across the room, Bran watched from his wheeled chair, eyes milky and deep as winter ponds. Jon met his brother's gaze and felt absurdly that Bran had known this turning long before they'd all been flung into its wake. When the feast waned into hushes and flickering embers, Jon and Asha slipped through side corridors toward the old library wing, repurposed as guest lodgings. The torches sputtered. Distant revelers sang a shanty of a mermaid who stole a lord's heart and left him drowning in shallow water. In the stairwell's half-shadow, Jon halted. Asha turned with quizzical brow. He touched her cheek, where his blood had dried, darkening now to rust. "You called me king. You were born stark yet wore the cloak of the night's watch, then the crown of a deserter's brother. Titles sit on you like armor never quite buckled. But on the sea, names are currency." She thumbed his jaw. "King can be spent dear. And queen, spend me wildly." The glint in her eye was half dare, half promise. He kissed her. Salt tang on her lips, the taste of wind that had traveled farther than any raven. The corridor tilted. Maybe his knees trembled. Maybe the castle breathed. Time lurched forward in a hush of pounding blood, and he forgot the weight of walls, of expectations, of ghosts. She leaned into him with a certainty that steadied his storm. Weeks passed, and Winterfell's courtyards echoed not with swords but with the pitch of saws biting wood. Masts rose like winter skeletal giants in the open field, beyond the hunter's snare, their spars braced by ropes strung to birch stakes. Shipwrights from Lordsport, Pike, Orkmont, and Harlaw swarmed the site, teaching northern apprentices how to bend green planks over heated frames. The scent of pine tar mingled with wood smoke. At night fires dotted the clearing, and songs in the harsh iron tongue competed with the softer timberfolk ballads. Jon walked the rows each evening with Asha, listening, learning. She named the parts of a longship as though reciting kin. Keelson, Strake, Garboard, Dragonhead prow. He answered with northern words for wind patterns and river currents that carved through the neck. They bridged languages and whispers, forging a dialect that belonged to them alone. One dawn, Jon found himself shoulder-deep in frigid water at the lake, out beyond the broken tower, heaving timber with a work crew. The chunks were towed from upriver forests. They had to soak before shaping. Every muscle ached, but the ache felt clean, uncomplicated, a baptism into this new endeavor. Across the water, Asha shouted orders from atop a hastily built pier, her silhouette dark against sunrise. She laughed whenever a log slipped and splashed him, and the men laughed with her, though none dared linger too long on her smile. Later, as they strode back through the muddy lane, Asha flung an arm around his shoulders. "You take to shipbuilding as some men take to murder." Comforting comparison. "I meant it kindly." She nudged him. "You work as if possession takes root in you. Build a frame, and the frame builds you." Jon wiped water from his brow. "In the watch we built only fire trenches and pyres." "And the wall?" He shrugged. "The wall was always there, immovable. We measured ourselves against it. These ships, they feel like answers to questions we haven't yet asked." They reached the gatehouse where an owl slept in the eaves, indifferent to their passage. Inside the yard, Arya sparred with Gendry using wooden maces shaped like oars. They cracked and whirled, more dance than duel. Jon paused to watch. Each blunt strike rang out, calling onlookers. Children mimicked the moves beside the well, twirling sticks. Soon enough, the yard would witness the birth of a new martial art. Part shield wall, part dexway, forged in this curious marriage of ice and salt. That night, at council, the murmurs grew bolder. Lord Serwyn protested the cost of iron nails, citing barren coffers from 3 hard winters. Lord Hornwood feared piracy along the White Knife. Asha answered first with jests. Kraken's honor, a tax on saltfish recipes. But John learned to chime in with steady facts. Tariffs lightened on grain imports via sea. Garrison duties shared by ironborn marines. The promise of better defense along the coasts from Skagos to Barrowton. Slowly, suspicion eased. Not dissolved, but loosened. Some battles were fought in words over dark ink. John discovered he liked this combat too, so long as Davos sat at his right hand, and Sansa kept the parchment neat. Beyond the halls of Winterfell, ravens flew farther than geese in mid-migration. At White Harbor, Lord Wyman convened shipwrights of his own, sending north entire lading slips of seasoned oak. Bear Island felled tall pines for masts. The Umbers of Last Hearth offered cord and hemp. In return, ironborn captains taught knots whose names sounded like curses and blessings alike. John and Asha visited each lordly holdfast in turn, sailing down the White Knife on a squat river galley christened Snowtide. The crew was half Northmen, half ironborn women clad in boiled leather. They passed fishing hamlets whose folk gaped at the sight of a direwolf banner rippling beside a black kraken. Children waved. Some tossed flowers. At Molestown an old woman spat, but her son hauled her back inside before trouble brewed. In White Harbor, the Merman's Court glittered gold by lamplight as Lord Wyman hosted a feast of oysters and beer. He toasted to the forging of a keel that shall bind our fates, and his words carried weight enough to shift the caution of lesser lords. Outside the tall windows, the harbor lay calm, but thunder muttered on the horizon, an omen that tides were changing. By first snow, 3 longships slid into the lake beside Winterfell, their hulls black as night, prows carved into snarling wolves, with kraken tentacles coiled beneath. They were named Frostafang, Sea Host, and Northbreaker. Asha oversaw launch, her grin visible through driving sleet. John stood under a fur-lined hood, while the first hull met water with a hiss and shudder that echoed through ice. Men cheered, and the sound ricocheted across the castle walls. That evening, in the solar overlooking the yard, John spread maps across a cedar table. Lines traced new trade routes: Winterfell to Pike, Pike to Fair Isle looping south to Old Town. Dots marked proposed lighthouse beacons along the stony shore. At his elbow lay parchments sealed in blue wax from Casterly Rock. Tyrion Lannister, now Lord Paramount, had sent word of interest in joint ventures: gold for timber, coin for protection against steppe raiders. Old enmities slumbered fitfully, yet coin sang a lullaby. Asha leaned over the map, braids damp from the lake spray. She tapped the neck of the bight. Hira. Build a small port near the Shadow Tower ruins. Narrow enough to defend, close enough to send patrols up the coast. Wildlings still cross in that region. Then hire them. Tormund's folk have more sea sense than you think. John traced a finger along the icy headlands. Convincing them will be yours to manage. They trust redheads more than wolves. Because redheads are mad, she quipped. Some truths are self-evident. He smiled. She regarded him for a moment, the lamplight turning her eyes bronze. When the first fleet's ready, sail with me to Pike. Let them see you stand on my deck, not just wave from a tower. He hesitated. Your uncles may not welcome me. Let them choke on their bile. They could not break me with scorn. They will break on you like surf on a cliff. She planted her hands on the table. A king who bends his knee to no tide. John considered the maps, coasts, rivers, the pale brush of sea lanes yet unnamed, and felt the slow unfurling of possibility, immense as deep water. Very well, he said. We sail at thaw. Asha's grin was an unsheathed knife. She plucked the inky-stained quill, splattered north of Skagos, and drew a looping line southwest. Then here's our maiden voyage, Winterfell to Great Wyke, paying honor to the stone throne, and after, up the sunset sea to Seaguard, where the Malisters watch the waves for raiders still. Let them see raiders come in peace. John raised a brow. Peace might frighten them more. Good. She rolled the map, tucking it into a leather case. Fear is only respect wearing an axe. That night wind howled round the roofs. rattling shutters. Jon lay awake beside Asha in chambers overlooking the godswood. Snow fluttered against the panes. He listened to her breathing, steady and calm, and felt the lingering ache of hammers in his arms. The shapes they were carving in the world. Ships, alliances, new names for storms. Like a constellation just beginning to reveal its pattern, he thought of his father's dream of honor, of Robb's crown, Sansa's resolve, Arya's relentless step. He thought of Ygritte's question, echoing down from the Frostfangs. "You know nothing, Jon Snow." Perhaps she had been right, and his life was a slow lesson in how large unknowing could be. He turned, brushed Asha's braid from her shoulder. She stirred, half-eyed, smiling even in sleep, as though chasing some bright sail in her dreams. In the hearth, embers glowed low. He let his eyes close, and somewhere between waking and dream, he felt the deck rise beneath him, smelled brine, heard the distant call of a gull far from any shore. The north was unmooring itself. And he, Jon Snow, drifted toward dawn with a kraken wolf flag snapping above. Spring broke like a sword drawn from its sheath. Ice cracked on rivers. Snow melted to reveal black earth eager for seed. Frostafang led Seost and Northbreaker down the white knife in a procession of banners and song. Small folk lined the banks, shouting blessings, casting sprigs of winter rose into the water. Jon stood at the prow of Frostafang, one hand grasping a dragon steel rail newly forged in White Harbor. Asha paced the deck like a captain born to storms, barking commands to oarsmen who rowed with crisp precision. They reached White Harbor in 3 days, the Manor fortress rising white and grand above the water. Jon met Lord Wyman on the quay, exchanging clasped forearms. The old lord's smile was wily. "A fleet that can slip up every river vein of the north. Your enemies will sleep uneasily. May they learn to love insomnia," Asha quipped. Lord Wyman's chuckle shook his girth. "I shall invest coin in every keel you raise, Lady Asha. And when they sail, they will carry Manderley White within their holds. Flour and salt pork." She guessed. "And ink." He winked. "Histories must be written." Jon spent the next fortnight in White Harbor negotiating dock rights, while Asha drilled marines beside the harbor forts, their shields painted half kraken, half direwolf. Children watched wide-eyed as ironborn women sparred with glaives, moving like waves across sand. The folk had never seen warriors who laughed aloud while dueling, who slapped shoulders between bouts and roared sea prayers into the wind. Some were scandalized. More were delighted. Word spread. From Barrowton to Last Hearth, tales flew quicker than ravens. The North had ships now. Ships captained by fearsome women and crewed by sea-hungry men. Fishermen in lonely coves found themselves hailed by Greyjoy longboats, offering trade rather than pillage. A cask of ale for a net of silver trout. A coil of hemp for a bundle of beaver pelts. Suspicion thinned where profit grew. Pike loomed like a broken crown of spearpoint islets under a slate sky when the fleet arrived midsummer. Salt wind whipped waves against black rock, sending spray high as tower windows. Asha stood at Frostafang's helm, feet planted wide. At her side Jon wore a traveler's cloak of walrus hide. The roar of ironborn thralls along the cliff paths reached them faintly, half Hinger, half Yahweh da-da-da. The portcullis of Pike's great arch groaned open, and longships rowing under black sails greeted the newcomers. They flanked Frostafang in wary formation, like wolves sizing up a stranger in their den. On the quay waited Lord Victarion Greyjoy. Shoulders massive, and face set in a scowl even the storms envied. Behind him towered the hammer-shaped fortress, banners of black kraken drooling reigned. A hush settled as Asha strode ashore with Jon at her side. Victarion's eyes flicked to their joined hands, to the direwolf stitched on Joan's jerkin. muscles in his jaw bunched. "Niece." His voice was low thunder. "Uncle." She tipped her head, casual as if greeting a drinking companion. "I bring my husband Jon Snow, king of ice and tide." Victarion's gaze lingered on Jon. Stark whelp turned Night's Watch oathbreaker turned. "What now, salt husband?" "King," Asha repeated, smile sharp. "And what do you bring Pike worth the title?" He gestured at the fleet, unimpressed. "3 wolf-headed boats? Ships enough to choke the gullet," she said. "And a treaty that makes the north our shoreward flank." Jon stepped forward. "I come offering trade routes free from reaving and war. Ironborn holds may reap timber and iron ore from northern quarries under fair bargain, not blood price." "Then?" Murmurs swept the gathering throng of captains. Some spat, but more leaned in. Victarion barked a laugh. "Peace breeds weak hands." "It breeds full bellies," Jon replied, voice calm. "Farmers fed fight better than thralls starving." The older man studied him, eyes shuttered. At last he grunted. "Speak inside. Rain will drown reason." He turned, cape snapping, and stalked toward the fortress. Asha sighed relief so slight it was almost swallowed by wind. Inside, the stone halls of Pike smelled of damp moss and old triumph. Salt-stained banners hung like shed skins. Jon traced pitted grooves in the corridor walls, marks of past raids. The chamber where they met was lit by well-oiled lamps. Maps of the western coast lay folded on a barnacle-scarred table. What followed was a duel of tongues and wills that raged long into night. Victarion demanded iron price for every bolt of northern cloth. Asha countered with silver price plus mutual defense pacts. Jon sat between them, tying loose ends into firm cord. New lighthouses on the Sunset Sea, a joint patrol along Fair Isle, ironborn trading posts at Barrowland ports. At dawn they sealed parchment with wax shaped from kraken and wolf joined. Victarion poured black rum into cups. "Time will prove if this pact weathers worse storms." Asha clinked her drink against Jon's. "Storms are merely stories the sea tells of itself." On the voyage home, Frostfang sliced through silver swells. Jon stood at the prow alone, letting brine sting his cheeks. Far behind, Pike dwindled like a jagged tooth. Ahead, the north waited. Yet he looked neither back nor forward. He gazed outward, where the horizon curled like a question mark of smoke. He felt the ship's frame beneath his boots, the pulse of oars, the song of ropes. Inside those sounds was the heartbeat of something vast and new. A realm where coastlines replaced walls and possibility surged with each incoming tide. Asha emerged from below decks, cloak whipping. She stepped beside him, sliding her hand into his. Together, they watched a pod of dolphins leap, sleek shadows drawn by curiosity. "First voyage of many," she said. "First paragraph of a longer tale," he answered. She grinned, eyes alight. "Then let's write it in surf and thunder." The ship's prow rose, broke water, and plunged into the next wave. Spray drenched them, tasted of salt and snow mingled, neither purely north nor purely sea, but something forged in the space between. As the sun climbed behind them, washing the deck in pale gold, Jon Snow and Asha Greyjoy stood unflinching at the edge of the world they were making. The Kraken Wolf banner streaming overhead like a prophecy delivered on wind. Okay. Moonless dark hung over the narrow sea, an ink spill streaked by clouds that drifted like banners torn in retreat. Frostfang rode those wavering shadows, her hull whispering salt secrets to the tide, as if conspiring with each swell. Jon Snow paced the quarterdeck with the rolling ease of a man born to decks, his cloak flicking behind him like a hunting hawk's tail. Far to starboard, pinpricks of lantern light winked where Sea Ghost cut a lazy curve through half-sleeping waves. Northbreaker held the leeward flank, oars slanting rhythmically, strokes timed to the creak of rigging so perfect the ship seemed bound by an invisible loom. Night Watch murmured low, respectful, when Jon drifted near. He paused to greet each by name: Hareth Saltsister, Kedge Pike, Robert of Torrens Square, because a king who reigned from decks must learn the pulse of timber and men alike. In the hush, he felt the world's rim stretched taut. a drumhead waiting for the blow that would unleash the true thunder of this fledgling empire. He slid gloved fingers along Frostfang's rail, thinking not of Winterfell's gray spires, but of distant coasts still unknown. City-states beyond the Jade Gates, shattered Valyria, the summer ports of Old Volantis. The map unrolled in his mind, blank parchment begging ink. A soft step warned him before Asha Greyjoy arrived from below, smelling of oak smoke and fresh pitch. She carried a rolled chart tucked beneath one arm, and 2 steaming cups in the other. Passing one to Jon, she drank deeply from her own. Steam hallowing her face. Mulled wine with pine sap and wild juniper, she said. Northman's remedy against sleeplessness. Jon tasted. Heat slid down his throat, lush with bitter spice. And does it work? For sleep? No. Her grin gleamed. But it makes wakefulness more pleasant. She spread the chart across a barrel lashed mid-deck. The flicker of a lantern revealed a coastline Jon did not recognize. Jagged, serrated isles scattered like teeth. The lonely light. She explained. Fingertip skimming the If curve. And here, west of Great Wyke, these tiny stones, Shield of Harlaw, Pebbleton, Salt Cliff, forgotten outposts. She tapped the left edge, far beyond any printed island. This patch the maesters leave blank, calling it the Sunset Sea, as if naming its edge will tame it. I wonder what lies beyond. There are tales. There are lies. She corrected. But lies cloak wishes. I would sail there after we have 36 good hulls, when men fear our kraken wolf more than storms. Jon traced the blank with his own finger, remembering stories old Nan once spun of water that led to the throat of the world, where dragons roosted on mountains of gold. What would you find? Whatever the world still hides, new settlements to raid. No, she corrected herself with a wry tilt of head. To trade. Ports not yet pledged to slavers or high garden coin. And if none exist, then we build them, claim them. He folded arms across his chest. An empire of coasts. Coasts, islands, rivers. Wherever a hull can nose shallow water, that is ours to protect. And tax. Jon's brows drew. You sound like a merchant. Merchants reign longer than kings. She rolled the chart. But we won't speak of reigns. We speak of years at sea so bountiful, no Northman will starve in winter. We speak of Ironborn who harvest silver price without bloodshed, so the old songs will sting less bitterly. Ben? A gust rattled the lines overhead. Jon considered the tilt of her gaze, always 10 heartbeats ahead, always measuring where storms might break. He found that vigor infectious, stirring a latent hunger he had not dared feed back at the wall. The hunger to shape realms. We'll need more ships before we sail west of the west, he said. Asha's laugh burst like chambered thunder. And more captains who can stomach calm seas as well as battle. But first we need to prove to your north it can flourish on water, and to my Ironborn that gold can taste sweeter than blood. Bender. She lifted the cup in salute. Jon returned the gesture. They drank in silence, the deck rising and falling beneath their boots, like a slow-beating heart. At dawn frost silvered every rope. The fleet turned northeast toward Deepwood Motte, where Lady Sibel Glover waited with an answer to Jon's latest raven. Her halls, once embittered by Ironborn raids, now prepared to witness the arrival of raiders turned allies. As Frostfang carved into the misty inlet, deer spooked on the wooded banks, fleeing the black shapes gliding past. Jon felt tension prick his neck, though he had written assurances of peace. But if this union faltered here, it would unravel everywhere. Deepwood's palisade wore fresh pine boughs, green fragrant, tied with pale ribbons that fluttered like hesitant smiles. On the shore, a narrow pier jutted into shallow water, hastily reinforced. Lady Sibel herself stood at its end, flanked by 50 Glover men in chain and furs. She lifted one gauntleted hand in welcome. The gesture was stiff but unmistakable. Jon disembarked first, ghost at heel. He bowed his head, though not so deeply as he would have in earlier years. Kings yield less than bastards. My lady, your peer held strong tide. She allowed a thin smile. Strong tide is easier than strong rumor. Some men still cling to grief sharper than barnacles. Ironborn griefs, northern griefs, both weigh anchors, Jon said. But anchors may be raised. Her gaze shifted over his shoulder, where Asha stepped onto the planks. A hush rippled among the Glover men. Their hands found sword hilts almost by reflex. Asha wore no armor, only a jerkin dyed midnight blue, but she moved with the coiled presence of a blade unsheathed. She offered Lady Sibel a curt bow, neither mocking nor meek. "We come to barter oak and iron," she said, "and to mend a wound." Lady Sibel's jaw set. Memories of slain kin, of smoke rising from deep wood walls, lingered in her eyes. Yet when she spoke, it was with measured restraint. "The wound is deep, but I have children who must inherit more than grudges." She extended her hand. Asha clasped it, not lingering, but firm. Alden Glover, Sibel's eldest, gestured inland. "We've cleared the stone roads for your wagons. Timber stands ready." Asha whistled, and a dozen ironborn deckmates guided oxen carts off Northbreaker's hold. They bore barrels of lamp oil, bundles of high-quality sailcloth from Mere, and 2 chests hammered from weirwood, gifted as tokens. Deals were struck in the yard. For every cart of pine and spruce destined for ship keels, an equal weight of Myrish cloth and Pentoshi spices would line deepwood cellars. The scribes kept pace with frantic quills. By dusk iron nails glinted in great heaps, while Glover carpenters measured planks to Frostfang specifications. Children dashed about, squealing in delight when an ironborn woman demonstrated how to splice rope so clean no water seeped. That night a feast spilled into the cleared bailey. No minstrels arrived from far cities. Instead, Deepwood's own shepherd boys piped on hollow reeds, and ironborn drummers hammered overturned buckets. The rhythm twined like newly forged chain between 2 peoples. A brewed from pine needles flowed. Jon caught glimpses of old scars hidden in sleeves, old resentments touched with wine and perhaps dulled. He sat beside Lady Sibel at high table, discussing grain shortages, river trade, the state of the northwestern watchposts. Asha circulated among the soldiers, arm-wrestling a Glover sergeant until her laughter rang above the fires. When she won, she ordered another round for her opponent. Laughter answered. Among the flares of torchlight, the possibility of forgiveness sprouted like mushrooms after rain. Sibel finally leaned close to Jon. "They respect her," she admitted. "They have reason. She fights as fiercely for peace as once for plunder." Lady Sibel studied Jon's profile. "And you trust that fight?" "With my life," he answered simply. "And with the North's." She considered, then lifted her cup. "Then, so shall I." The toast rippled outward, echoed from throat to throat until the bailey thrummed. The thawing summer rolled into a bold copper-lit autumn. Under Asha's relentless tutelage, Frostfang and her sister ships began escort caravans laden with Manderley flour and Umbers-cured meat to lonely northern outposts, starved by prior winters. Sea Ghost slipped as far as Talhart's Dusk Harbor, collecting barrels of whale oil to warm Winterfell's distant towers. Every journey carried trade ledgers alongside oars. Every return trip ferried new planks, miners, even crofters enticed by the chance to settle along renewed fishing villages. Meanwhile, Jon established the Northern Admiralty inside Winterfell's ancient library, tables cleared of dust to hold tide charts. Davos Seaworth oversaw daily logs, his ink-spattered hands flying across parchment faster than most maesters could recite their vows. Valiant men and women of Bear Island, Sisterton, even frost-hardened Skagosi were offered commissions as deck officers. The old identity of Ravagers faded beneath shared purpose. They called themselves Waveguard now, proud of a name born where ice meets brine. Still, not all was calm. Rumors thickened like storm clouds from the south. Highgarden's new Lord Paramount, Willis Tyrell, had revived levy counts along the Mander in response to talk of northern Ironborn expansion. Piracy, he claimed, threatened trade with Old Town. In Lannisport, Tyrion Lannister's envoys reported whispers that the Dornish fleets were being courted by Bravos, perhaps to hedge against Kraken raids that no longer raided. With every raven, Davos saw a pattern. The Old Kingdoms feared what they could not predict. Jon gathered his council in the solar above Winterfell's great hearth. Sansa presided over documents thick with coin tallies. Bran sat silent with eyes on distances none of them could see. Davos hunched near the fire, tugging his beard. Opposite them, Asha stood arms crossed, as if daring tidings to start a fight. They build fleets of their own, Davos said. Tyrell galleys, Dornish sandships. Lannister gold paying for hardwood in arbor yards, not yet large but growing. Armies on water are costlier than on land, Sansa observed. If they risk that, they see profit beyond mere defense. Or threat, Asha muttered. Fear puffs sails fuller than wind. Jon tapped the map. The Reach fears for its Silk Road, Dorne for its summer wine shipments, the Lannisters for their gold routes. If we show them open harbors, tariffs fair and public, fear withers. Fear withers slowly, Sansa cautioned. True, he said, but suspicion rots fast. We stall their rot by inviting them north to witness how we govern water. His gaze lifted to Asha. Ambassadors, a royal regatta to White Harbor. Showcase our coat of waves. She rolled a shoulder as if shrugging off heavy mail. If they decline, then we know they plan war, Bran said, breaking silence. His voice had grown stiller with each moon, yet now it cut firm. But they will not. Curiosity beats dread. They will come. Sansa eyed Bran warily. And what will they see? Jon answered, not raiders. Partners. Agreement. Settled like a shared breath. Plans formed swiftly. Messages sealed by Northern Snowflake and Kraken Wax. Dispatched to Lannisport, Old Town, Sunspear, and even King's Landing where a boy king of Baratheon blood kept shaky peace. The letters invited each to witness the North's first maritime exhibition, promising new charter routes and mutual defense pacts against true piracy from the Stepstones. They signed their names side by side, Jon of House Stark, Asha of House Greyjoy, beneath a sigil newly drawn, a direwolf intertwined with a kraken, both crowned by a single seven-pointed starless helm. Davos regarded the ink with a glimmer of pride almost paternal. Preparations devoured weeks. White Harbor's dockyards groaned under supplies. Manderley carpenters erected a grand pavilion draped in blue-green banners. Frostfang underwent a polish so fierce her dark hull gleamed like obsidian. Scribes penned charters for maritime law, an amalgam of northern justice and ironborn practicalities. Theft punished by rootless exile, but restitution favored over floggings. Duels by shield and oar, allowed in certain coves at dawn. The riverfolk's right to safe harbor enshrined. Arya commanded a special contingent of scouts trained to navigate both deck and tree line, quick to thwart smugglers. She named them Stream Shadows, painting their shields with silver ripples. They drilled under moonlight along the banks of the White Knife, arrows stitching water without breaking surface. When the appointed day arrived, sails stippled the dawn horizon like blossoms. Dromons of crimsons and golden roses, lean Dornish gull-wing cogs, arbor wine barges painted green, Lannister war galleys with lion figureheads, each ship turned upriver, banners glinting. The harbor fists of spectators roared. Frostfang led the welcoming line, guns silent, but decks crowded with musicians blowing pipes carved from weirwood, drums beaten by ironborn deckhands in tuneful unity. Lord Willis Tyrell arrived first to the pier, his leg brace hidden under a voluminous cloak, embroidered with golden petals. He bowed stiffly to Jon, offered formal greetings to Asha, eyebrow arched at her bare forearms and sea-scarred tattoos. Next came Prince Quentyn Martell, eyes shadowed yet warm, flanked by Dornish sailors who eyed the chill air as though it might nibble skin. Tyrion Lannister's envoy. Sir Bronn of the Blackwater, now ennobled and grinning, brought a ledger thicker than any sword. Even Braavos sent a sea lord's factor in grey silks. They dined under the pavilion that first night, torches flickering wild. Distant storms threatened but never broke, as though the gods themselves paused to watch. Sansa sat at Jon's right, Asha at his left, presenting a unified helm. Courses arrived: raw oysters steeped in lemon snow, boar roasted with juniper, sweetroot pies. Conversation ebbed, flowed and gradually warmed. Fishing innovations over the western banks, yield projections of northern grain, now transported by wave rather than hoof. The possibility of shared patrol charters along the narrow sea to deter.
Steps down.
Yet beneath conviviality lurked tests. Tyrell merchants asked about tariffs on Reach silk. Braavosi inquired how debts would be settled if a vessel foundered in northern ice. Dornish knights with snake-fast smiles offered to exchange grape cuttings for access to Iron Island's port taxes. Jon answered each with calm detail, citing drafted laws. Asha peppered her replies with seafarers' humor, but never ceded ground. By midnight, many doubts had softened, not vanished, but salted for curing. Still, not all hearts were tethered. Across the banquet, a slender man in black and gold lingered near the shadows, seldom speaking. Jon recognized him only from earlier heraldic introductions. Sir Hobber Redwine, representing the famed Arbor Fleet. His gaze kept slipping to the water gate beyond, where White Harbor's lighthouse shone. Unease radiated like cold. Jon stored the observation. The next morning dawned bright. Harbor mist glowing pink. Delegates boarded Frostfang for a ceremonial tour upriver. Jon directed the helmsman while Asha served as coxswain, voice ringing crisp as gull cry. Highborns accustomed to galley cushions paled when oarsmen quickened pace, sending the vessel skimming swift as a thrown axe. Yet laughter bubbled too. Tyrion's envoy Bronn leaned over rail beside Willis Tyrell, wagering which house sigil flag would snap most fiercely in the breeze. Mid-journey, as pine woods slipped by in silent ranks, a horn blared from astern. Northbreakers signaled distant sail, unknown, approaching fast from seaward. Jon exchanged a look with Davos and ordered Frostfang turned. Delegates murmured, excitement sharpened by dread. As they rounded a bend, the unknown vessel broke through mist. A sleek black longship, but broader, lower, and bearing no sigil. Its sail was patchwork gray, its oars stroked in eerie unison. At its prow, a figure in tattered cloak raised a staff crowned by an iron hook. Asha's eyes narrowed. That is no captain under our banner. The unknown vessel veered, angling to ram Frostfang broadside. Jon's shout reached the oarsmen. Back water, archers ready. Stream shadows on deck knocked arrows, lines tensioning. The adversary drew nearer, then unleashed. Not ram, but burning pots of oil hurled by slings crashed against water, flaming sheets sweeping toward Frostfang's hull. Panic rippled among delegates. Quentin Martell shielded a young scribe. Tyrell men fumbled for swords. But Asha surged forward, barked orders. Sail trimmed. Frostfang sidestepped the flames with a deft pivot only a longship could manage. Water hissing where licks of fire glanced her planks. Ghost snarled from bow, hair bristling. Jon signaled. Arya streamed shadows loosed a volley. Arrows hissed, lodging in the attacker's sail lines flesh. One pot-bearer fell screaming overboard. The black vessel faltered, pivot turning messy. Northbreakers swept in from port, ramming its shoulder into the enemy hull. Wood cracked like thunder. Ironborn marines leapt, axes coated in fresh pitch, borders in snarling ferocity. The battle lasted heartbeats, too swift and brutal for the highborn watchers to parse. When silence returned, the hostile ship listed, water gushing through its seam. Survivors fell to knees, bound by stream shadows. Jon strode down the gangplank onto the sinking deck. Splinters crunching, he confronted the cloaked leader. Beneath the hood was a gaunt face, cheeks scarred by self-inflicted lines, eyes, twin pits of fanatic refusal. Around his neck lay a medallion shaped as a burning heart pierced by sword. "A Harlaw zealot," Davos muttered, arriving behind Jon. The prisoner spat seawater. "The sea is false, the north an emptiness ready for cleansing. Fire alone purges darkness." Jon knelt, voice even. "You attacked a peaceful delegation. Whose command?" "Shadow. Light. No king." The zealot's smile bled. "We are flame-born. Water will burn." Jon rose, pulse cold. He signaled Arya. The zealots were forced onto Northbreaker's hold, bound. Frostfang made for White Harbor with renewed caution. As they docked, delegates disembarked in uneasy hush. At an emergency council in the pavilion, Tyrell and Martell representatives demanded assurances. "If fanatics threaten your rivers," Sir Bronn said, voice hard, "our trade cannot risk the flame." Jon addressed them plain. This proved the value of joint defense. "My archers stood with ironborn marines to protect every soul aboard. None here died. Alone that would not be true." A murmur of reluctant agreement met his words. Asha laid out evidence. The zealots' ship lacked brand new build, likely stolen from Essosi Wharf. They bore no national allegiance. Only zeal. "Zeal can be purchased," Prince Quentyn said quietly. Sansa, reviewing the prisoner's scant possessions, lifted a charred scrap of parchment. A half-sigil, lion-shaped, faintly visible. Gasps rippled. Tyrion Lannister's envoy stiffened. Bronn's hand fell to hilt. Jon's gaze went flinty. "Do not leap to blame. Pirates salvage sails from wrecks. Until we know, rumor benefits only chaos." Still, suspicion coiled in the shadows that night. Delegates kept guards double. The exhibition continued, but the laughter had edges. Jon, pacing the cliffs above the harbor, felt weight heavy as chainmail. Asha joined him, wind whipping her braids across pale moon. "They wanted to fracture this," she said. "Someone fears united coasts," he agreed. Her voice roughened. "West of the West might wait. Our enemy lies nearer." Winter arrived early. Frost needled every line by morning after the exhibition. Delegates departed with guarded respect. Tyrell scribes carrying drafts of mutual patrol charters. Martell corsairs impressed by joint maneuvers. Lannister envoys vowing to alert Tyrion to zealot menace. Yet trust was fragile as ice crystals. Jon returned to Winterfell to find letters from Castle Black. Wildling hunters had spotted red priests preaching war north of the Gift, promising eternal dawn beyond the wall of ice. Worse, reports from the Trident told of charred fishing hamlets, survivors whispering of robed attackers who set nets ablaze. As snow lashed the shutters, Jon convened his admiralty in the Long Hall. Bran described visions of a spreading fury of flame, a zeal that sought to dry up the world's seas so only fire and ash remained. The council fell silent beneath his words. Asha broke it. "Then we drown it." Plans crystallized. Waveguard squadrons to patrol from Skagos to Eastwatch. Raven relays to coordinate with Black Brothers. Southern allies invited to send detachments. Martell sandships armed with scorpions. Tyrell galleys with catapults of quick dousing slurry. Lannister warships carrying chainshot for dismasting. Jon addressed his people on Winterfell's ramparts the next dawn, breath turning icy silver. "We have shown the world that water can unite houses older than hate. Now a fire rises to undo what we build. But winter favors those who know the chill. The cold sea stands with us." Beneath him, Northerners stamped spears. Ironborn clanged axes on shields. Riverfolk sailors raised oar butts high. A roar swelled and broke like surf. Asha stepped beside Jon, voice booming. "Let zealots bring flame. We shall answer with tide. They will learn the world is not theirs to scorch." Snow thickened through the day, but preparations advanced. Frostfang's black hull was coated in a glazing of frost that sparkled like stardust. Northbreaker's marines trained with buckets, perfecting drills to smother firepots. New ships under construction. Ice Song, Grey Torrent, were retrofitted with copper-lined water pumps designed by a Wintertown tinkerer. The fleet would be a moving wall of chilled spray. Davos recommended forging alliances with the Stormlands, whose storms could scatter any burning fleet. Jon penned letters to their young lord, Shira Baratheon, offering mutual support and trade of lumber for citrus to combat scurvy. Meanwhile, Arya streamed shadows infiltrated river villages seeking traces of zealot recruiters, cutting off the serpent's tongue. Yet the enemy struck swifter than foreseen. On the eve of departure, a raven arrived from North Shield, a small fishing port near Shadow Tower. Sea on fire, the parchment smudged with soot. Jon read aloud to Asha. Her knuckles whitened. Without waiting for full muster, Frostfang and Sea Ghost heaved anchor, racing through black night along the teeth of the bight, sails snapping like drumskins. Snow-stung eyes, but they pressed. As dawn bled thin, smoke rose ahead, dark pillars, stark against white sky. North Shield's wharf was aflame. Wooden cottages crackled like torches. Frostfang beached smoothly onto packed shingle. Jon led Marines across wet sand where corpses lay charred. But some villagers remained alive, huddled under overturned boats. Stream shadows doused smoldering roofs, while Asha searched shorelines for enemy sign. Ghost loped, sniffing. He halted at the burned pier, hackles raised. Jon knelt, finding a symbol scorched into plank. The burning heart again, but beneath it, a serpent coil. He recognized the sigil from dusty tomes. The fiery serpent of the Red Priests of Volantis. So not random zealots, an organized sect. They tallied the toll. 9 dead villagers, 2 fishing skiffs lost, but the port structures salvageable. Jon's jaw clenched. We hold funeral rites, then rebuild. Show them Firefeed's new growth. Then, Asha pressed a charred timber into the snow until steam hissed. But first, we hunt. Word was sent upriver to rally the full fleet. Allies responded swiftly. Within a fortnight, white sails trimmed with Reach gold, Dornish orange, Lannister red assembled off the frigid coast. The sight stirred awe among North Shield's survivors. Colors never seen together outside tourney fields, now arrayed under Krakenwolf leadership. Prince Quentyn arrived aboard a sleek vessel christened Morning Spear, its prow carved as a rising sun pierced by spear shaft. Willis Tyrell sent Bright Bloom, a squat yet sturdy galley fitted with copper-sprayed arrow slits and a complement of master carpenters. Bronn commanded Lion's Share, swaggering across its deck while instructing crossbowmen where to fix scorpion bolts. They convened in icy shallows aboard Frostfang's central deck. Detad. Jon outlined strategy. Scatter reconnaissance outriders, bait zealot fleet with rumor of a trading convoy, then encircle cunningly within the Fjord of Harlaw, where tides favor oars over wind. Davos added tide tables. Arya spoke of covert lantern signals. Asha hammered fists on the bulkhead each time agreement clicked. The plan hinged on knowledge gleaned from stream shadow interrogations. The Zealots' flagship, a repurposed Braavosi warcog renamed Herald of Dawn, wielded Greek fire stolen from Cohor smiths. If that vessel burned, their morale died with it. Night before battle, frost-coated decks in glassy sheen. Jon walked alone among lashed barrels. Bran had written advice by Raven. Spoken word meaningless for eyes beyond flesh. But his letter spoke of currents converging, where the sea's teeth bite and stars lie mirrored in black water. Jon carried that prophecy like a lodestone. He found Asha at the prow, peering into dark. Storm ahead, she said. Jon considered the low bank of clouds. You fear. I taste copper and wind, battle hunger. She turned, expression solemn. If pyromancers light that Greek fire, water may not douse it. We could lose ships, men you. We stand together. He clasped her forearm. When first we wed, I feared the north would drown in salt. Now I see salt preserves. She snorted low. Preserving kings makes poor pickles. Yet she laced her fingers through his. They lingered until stars flickered out one by one, and dawn stained east pale. Dawn of battle broke quiet. Scouting outriders, disguised as lone merchantmen, lured Herald of Dawn and its sibling vessels, a half-dozen flame cogs, toward Harlaw's jagged fjord. Frostfang led allies into hidden coves at the fjord's mouth, sails furled. Swells slurped at black rock, echoing heartbeats. Arya signaled from stream shadow skiff. 8 enemy sails entering strait. Asha's whistle cut air. Waveguard oars dipped, soundless. Frostfang slipped from shadow like a shark. Sea Ghost on her starboard. Lion's share port, Bright Bloom astern blocking retreat. Morning Spear angled across exit, forming a living net. Herald of Dawn's captain realized trap too late. The zealot cog swung broadside. Flamethrower, turret swiveling. Green tongue spat. A column of burning gel arced toward Frostfang. But Asha had studied the weapon's reach. Her helmsman cut hard starboard. Flame hissed into water, erupting in jade fury. Frostfang's wet brine-soaked hull steamed, but did not catch. Joan's archers loosed storm. Arrows wrapped in cloth, soaked with chilled pitch, pierced Herald's sails, igniting controlled blue flames that ate cloth, but died on wood. Confusion reigned aboard zealot decks. Bronze lions share loose chain shot shredding oars. Morning Spear fired sun scorpions, heavy bolts tipped with glass spheres that shattered into powdered lime, choking lungs of deckhands. Sea Ghost's boarding party, led by Lady Lyanna Mormont in scaled armor, vaulted rails with war cries. Ironborn women and Bear Island shield maidens crashed upon zealot decks in a tide of steel. Lyanna's short axe rose and fell like metronome, each stroke clearing space for water-bearers who dumped barrels onto smoldering planks. Meanwhile, Bright Bloom unleashed Tyrell ingenuity. Trebuchets lobbed clay jars of sap-rich resin that burst into sticky slush, smothering fire by starving it of air. Victorian Greyjoy arrived to command new ship Stormwraith, rammed a second zealot cog, splintering hull and sending robed men tumbling ablaze into sea. Jon climbed Herald of Dawn's shattered bulwark with Arya at side, Longclaw whistling through steam. Zealot captain met him bearing a blade glowing red from Flame's kiss. Heat shimmered. Jon parried, steel clanging. The deck pitched. Smoke coils blinding. Arya darted, slashing hamstrings of zealots charging Jon's flank. He ducked a burning sweep, drove his pommel into captain's jaw. The zealot snarled a prayer, lunged anew. Jon allowed momentum, pivoted, and flung the man against mast coated in pitch. The captain's cloak ignited. He screamed a hymn torn to shreds by flame. Jon inhaled scorched cedar, feeling no triumph, only weary necessity. A horn blast cut through battle. Herald's flamethrower spar collapsed in sparks, felled by Northbreaker's ramming spur. The flagship, mortally holed, began to list. Asha bellowed for retreat. Waveguard Marines herded prisoners across makeshift planks to Frostfang. Jon swept Arya ahead as deck tiles split. They leapt last as Herald rolled, flame sputtering then drowned by icy surge. Steam roared skyward, a dragon exhaling its dying breath. The remaining zealot ships broke, scattering up Fjord where Morning Spear and Stormwraith drove them aground. Green flames guttered on water's surface, then hissed into nothing. Silence lifted, broken only by gull cry. Frostfang's deck sagged with exhausted victors, armor blackened by soot. Jon stood amid them, breath labored. He met Asha's gaze across oars. She gave a tired, feral grin and raised her sword in salute. The fleet answered with a rolling cheer. Raw throats united. Aftermath was grim tally but also rebirth. They lost 2 ships, Mander's Hope and Sworn Wave, burned to the waterline, 15 Marines dead, scores wounded. Yet every other vessel survived, and enemy cogs lay sunk or captured. Raylord zealots taken alive were questioned, revealing networks of fire cult sympathizers stretching from Red Keep catacombs to Associ slave ports. A council of allied lords convened aboard Brightbloom to decide justice. Some called for execution, others for exile. Jon proposed sending them to the Night's Watch, where the wall might temper zeal. Prince Quentyn and Willas Tyrell ultimately agreed, citing precedent. Threats to realm redirected to serve. When raven-bearing victory news reached Winterfell, bells rang. Small folk, 200 leagues away, lit torches in praise, ironically echoing the flame they had vanquished. North Shield fishermen returned nets to water sooner than thought possible, guided by Waveguard longship escorts. Warm casks of Dornish wine gifted to garrisoned marines forged new bonds. Across Westeros, rumor of the Battle of Harlaw's Fjord carried weight. The North Ironborn Alliance had defended not just themselves, but common trade for all shores. Coin counters listened, and suspicion cooled. Tyrell and Martell signatories ratified the Northern Maritime Code, binding themselves to joint patrols. Lannister crews joined training at Bear Island. Even Stormlanders sent a token squadron, commanded by young Shira Baratheon, whose laugh boomed at deck jokes rougher than thunder. The Great Fleet of Winter Tide, the name given by a Reach bard quick to coin songs, numbered 27 by midwinter, with keels for 10 more laid in White Harbor and Pike. But Jon refused complacency. He rode north to Castle Black, meeting with Lord Commander A.D. Tollett to reinforce sea patrols along the coast of Skagos. Together they built lookout fires fueled by driftwood soaked in whale oil, visible leagues offshore. Wildlings, once foes, now joined as tide runners, guiding watch skiffs among treacherous reefs. In return, Waveguard delivered salt cod and fur blankets. While Jon forged vigilance, Asha crossed seas to Lordsport, summoning Ironborn captains who still balked at trading profit for pillage. She argued with steel-tough words, showing ledger proofs of coin heavier than rated trinkets. She offered each dissenting captain a choice. Sign charter and receive rights to 2 new longships, or sail alone and be barred from every northern port. Faced with scarcity, most bent knee. Those who refused found their crews slipping away to safer wages. In months, reaving all but ceased, replaced by sanctioned privateering against Stepstone corsairs, a taste of battle to feed old appetites while serving greater good. Snowmelt poured down from the Frostfangs come early spring, swelling rivers that fed the White Knife. Frostfang anchored off Winterfell's lakeshore once more, bearing not only cargo but envoys from as far as Bravos and Ibn, intrigued by stable shipping lanes across the shivering sea. Jon stood at harbor edge watching black hull silhouettes mirrored in cold water, realizing a vision had crested tides into reality. A northern ironborn naval empire. Yet empire bore perils not only physical. Sansa approached with scrolls heavy in her arms. "Our treasuries surge," she reported, "but so does cost. Wages, shipwright contracts, lighthouse maintenance. Mander coin covers part, but taxation will tighten. Wintertown can't bear more levies," Jon observed. "We must diversify, perhaps inland trade, grain to the Erie, wool to River Run." She hesitated. "Or marriage alliances." Jon smiled wry. "Another? I think one seafaring wife is handful enough." "Not you," Sansa said. "Others. Lady Lyanna Mormont's matchless spirit draws suitors already." In council, they debated coin, port governance, distribution of spoils. Politics, Jon realized, was another sea, its currents deceptive. He missed the simpler language of oars and sails. But Asha thrived in these negotiations, brandishing wit to outflank accountants. When a Bravosi factor attempted to undervalue Wolf Kraken escort rates, she produced fragments of burnt cog sails as demonstration of the cost of unescorted voyages. The factor folded. One dusk, as they overlooked the godswood where new saplings budded, Asha nudged Jon's shoulder. "When we wed, you feared the North would drown. Now you drown in bureaucracy." "Perhaps bureaucracy will drown itself," he muttered. "Not if we chart its depths." She unrolled yet another chart, this one a diagram of lighthouse placements spanning from the Arbor North to Hardhome. A network. Each tower housing scribes to log ship traffic, send ravens, collect modest lamp taxes. Funds flow back into maintenance. Self-sustaining. Dah. Jon exhaled a chuckle. And bureaucrats fear to lose jobs, so they defend the towers. Clever. She tapped his chest. You kneeled at dawn of battle, blade drenched in zealot blood. Yet you pale before ink. Come, King Snow, we brave deeper seas. He kissed her knuckles, feeling calluses warmed by heart. Behind them, torches flickered. Ahead, twilight pooled violet. In that hush, he sensed again the world tip toward horizons uncharted, and knew their chosen tide would carry them far. Summer's green mantle unfurled across the north. Fields once fallow now yielded wheat bound for Taroshi breweries. Iron bars from Pike were hammered into anchor flukes sold back at triple weight. Trade caravans roved safer roads patrolled by hybrid companies of Glover scouts and iron-born shield maidens. On Bear Island, children learned knots before letters. At White Harbor, the first ship wholly built under joint supervision, Heartwave, slid into water, her sides inlaid with gleaming white weirwood and black steel from Harlaw for strakes. The crowd gasped over her elegance. Songs sprouted. Jon watched the launch from Frostfang's deck, heart swelling. Ghost dozed at his feet, muzzle twitching. Asha stood at bow, hair streaming, and for an instant Jon felt the world pause, breathless, caught in the cusp of futures. Our empire is born, she whispered. He answered, an empire of tide and frost, and of iron hearts that refuse to burn. Ships blew horns in celebration, echoes rippling across glassy harbor. Heartwave's sail unfurled, white with intertwining kraken tentacles, wrought in gray thread beneath a leaping direwolf stitched black. It bellied with wind, turning the ship toward open sea. Jon Snow reached for Asha's hand. Together they faced the sea's bright threshold, neither land nor water, but the shimmering line where every story begins anew, and stepped forward, captains of a world remade by daring, where ice and salt bound hearts stronger than steel and carried them, forever, upon the restless tide. Kai. The tide had turned steel blue by the hour Heartwave cleared the White Knife estuary, her brand new strakes hissing as they sliced the river's last brackish twist into open sea. Jon Snow watched from Frostfang's forecastle, the salt-sharp wind ruffling the short hairs at his nape. 27 ships fanned behind them in a long crescent. Kraken wolf-bannered caravels, low-draft longships rigged for speed, and 2 reach galleys bright as summer wheat, their hulls loaned in friendship by Lord Willis Tyrell. Above, gulls circled in raucous approval, a living blessing cast upon this second-season fleet. They carried with them timbers from deepwood motte, iron nails forged in pike, manderley flour, Dornish olives steeped in oil, and most valuable of all, the promise that northern winter grain would reach far ports untouched by frostbite's hunger. Yet even as hope billowed in their sails, Jon felt the gravity of quiet portents. Bran's last raven, penned in the tight, clipped script that hinted at visions neither restful nor kind, lay folded in his inside breast pocket. It carried a single warning. Byre's shadow lengthens from the east. Beneath it walks an old name thought drowned. No more. No less. Jon's thumb now found the creases of that scrap, as though seeking to iron out prophecy itself. Asha Greyjoy vaulted the ladder onto the forecastle, braids snapping. She tossed him a look equal part storm and sunrise. If I steer Heartwave beyond Fair Isle before supper, I'll claim the cabin ale. Give the order, Wolf King. Jon smiled despite the heaviness of omen. She's yours. I'll keep Frostfang pacing her quarter until we've cleared the sunset current. Try not to brood holes in your deck while I'm gone. She slapped his shoulder, then barked for a skiff. 2 minutes later, she was racing over the waves, standing tall in the bow like a masthead come to life, spray turning her jerkin darker than night. Jon tracked her until she disappeared up Heartwave's side, crowd of sailors cheering her arrival. Davos Seaworth emerged from below, rubbing his joints. Fair wind and a keen eye. Nothing else a captain can ask. Unless prophecy counts. He jerked his chin toward the breast pocket where Bran's message hid. Jon offered the letter, but Davos waved it off. I can smell worry better than read it. Every hull out yonder carries a whisper of danger. No voyage worth sailing lacks one. I remember a time the sea felt like escape, Jon said quietly, gaze on rolling swells. Now it feels like a chessboard. Every wave a square. But you've queens enough. Davos tipped his head toward Heartwave, where Asha's laughter carried faintly. And nights that ride gulled back. He pointed up as Ghost, restless beast, padded to Jon's side and pressed a nose to the breeze. The morning passed in crisp routine. Glover helmsmen tested new tiller weights. Manderley quartermasters logged barrel counts. Stream shadow outriders in nimble skiffs scouted ahead, cutting wakes like quicksilver. By late afternoon, the fleet skirted the rocky spit called Old Flint's Tooth. A watchman's horn bleated twice. Sight of smoke on the horizon, west-southwest. Joan's hand tightened on rail. Spyglass confirmed it. A narrow smudge trailing skyward, dark as spilled ink against a lemon sky. Davos' brows met. Driftwood fire? Or a burning ship? Joan's mind leapt to Bran's portents. Signal Heartwave and Morning Spear. Course alteration to intercept. Orders ran down rigging like squirrels. Frostfang bore southwest. Wind freshened. Snapping sails taut. The fleet bunched instinctively, predator poise in every line. An hour later they crested a ridge of waves and found the source. A single islander cog half gone to charred ribs, listing but not yet sunk. Her sail, once striped Baratheon yellow and black, was reduced to a clawed handful drooping round the mast. No other vessel lay near. The fire had eaten quick and vicious, but something had quenched it before total ruin. Patches of deck still steamed, slick with seawater. Jon and Davos boarded with a party of stream shadows rigged for rescue. Smoke stung nostrils, timbers hissed underfoot. Near the shattered quarterdeck they found bodies, 5 sailors scorched or cut. Among the dead lay a child of perhaps 12 winters, cheeks streaked with soot, eyes glassy skyward. Davos muttered a rough prayer to mother and father both. As they searched, Ghost padded to a sealed hatch secured by iron chain. The dire wolf snarled low, pawing. Arya Stark, commanding the stream shadows, knelt, dagger flashing, and pried the bolt. The hatch burst outward, and a woman stumbled forth clutching a heavy oaken chest bound in bronze. Her hair was ash white. Her dress, once fine Dornish cotton, now tattered and streaked with soot. She rasped words thick with fear, taker of names. Wings of night. Before fainting, they bore her and the chest back to Frostfang. Maester Walken treated her singed lungs with pine syrup. When consciousness returned under flickering lamplight, she named herself Belandra of Lys, emissary to the Iron Bank of Bravos. Her ship, Seaward Grace, departed King's Landing, bearing ledgers of royal debt. Debts the Boy King's council aimed to renegotiate through Ironbank's quiet men. But in the Bay of Crabs they were overtaken by a war galley flying no colors. Grapples bit, boarders in pitch-black armor swept decks, seeking the dragon's price. When none surrendered it, they fired the hull with green pots, left survivors to burn. Belandra's gaze fixed on Jon with haunted intensity. They wore a sigil scraped out, but I saw it fleeting on a pauldron. A red eye crowned in iron. Crow's eye, they called him in whispers. A dead Greyjoy come back. Jon felt blood chill. Euron? The name slithered from long-ago nightmares. Reports had placed him drowned near Old Wick during the Stormlord's rebellion, but Euron Greyjoy's legend defied graves. Jon glanced at Davos. The Onion Knight's eyes darkened. Asha must hear. The chest Belandra guarded contained not coin, but parchments. Promissory notes from the crown. Seals broken. Parchment edges charred. Yet beneath the ledgers lay a smaller box of ebony wood, lid carved with a 7-pointed star undone by cracks. Within, nestled in black silk, glittered 3 tiers of ruby. Dragonfire gems rumored to have adorned Rhaegar Targaryen's breastplate. Jon felt weight of history. If Euron had attacked for these, their value surpassed coin. They were symbols of royal blood, relics to conjure loyalties or stir rebellion. Worse, rumor claimed such rubies could be used in blood magic rituals favored by red priests. Bran's letter thrummed in Jon's pocket. Fire's shadow lengthens. Night fell heavy. Asha came aboard Frostfang, face carved from storm cloud. She recognized Euron's unmarked tactics. Swift strike, vanishing like mist, and curses spilled more bitter than salt. She swore by every drowned god's tentacle to gut her uncle if rumor proved true. Jon convened a war council. Willis Tyrell and Prince Quentyn arrived by lamp-lit skiff. Bronn straddled the rail, crossbow slung casual as a smirk, but eyes cold. Maester Walken laid maps across the wardroom table. Sightings of a black-hulled leviathan dubbed Silence pinned lines from Casterly Rock to the Stepstones. Merchant rumors? Fisher tales. Euron's reappearance could destabilize more than trade. He might claim to wield a dragon horn rumored lost after the Doom, stoking fear to bend weak lords. "We cannot chase phantoms across seas," Willis argued, brace clicking as he shifted weight. "Our hulls laden with food and cloth will rot before we corner him." Asha slammed fist. "Ignore him and the Crow's Eye will come to you with hellfire. He collects horrors the way other men hoard rare wines." Jon raised hand. "We split fleet. Heartwave, Frostfang, and Sea Ghost hunt Euron west of Fair Isle. Waveguard's fastest hulls. The remainder continue to Gulltown, deliver grain before mold touches hull. We cannot fail our word." Davos seconded. Quentyn volunteered Morning Spear for the hunt. Willis offered Brightbloom, but Jon declined. Its hold too vital. Instead, Bronn and Lyons shared joint pursuit with Reach crossbowmen eager to bleed pirates. Belandra of Lys insisted on accompanying. She had to see the rubies safe to Bravos. Jon hesitated, but her knowledge of Iron Bank cipher routes could prove useful. Asha scoffed yet allowed it. By dawn the fleet parted. Frostfang's strike force veered into deeper water. Sails trimmed for speed. Sky glowed pewter, heavy with unspent rain. Jon took the wheel personally. Ghost stood sentinel beside. Belandra braced against rail, eyes afire with something between dread and purpose. For 3 days they followed Crumbs, a charred fishing coracle near Pebbleton. Oars hacked. A shepherd's report of a behemoth ship silhouetted at dusk, sails blacker than midnight. Each clue sharpened the hunt. Morale soared as water barrels dwindled slower than spirits. Asha's deckhands swapped gallows tales of Euron's cabal, a mute crew with tongues cut. Deck benches carved from weirwood stolen at knife point from haunted groves. On the fourth dawn a gull call cracked the hush. Lookout sighted a silhouette off the starboard bow, rising from fog like a city wall afloat. Through glass, a mountainous ship, triple-masted, hull sheathed in iron plating, dotted with spikes. No banners. No sound but the slap of tide. "Silence," Asha breathed, hatred copper-tart in her voice. Jon rang general alert. "Dot to me." Frostfang's drums thundered. Morning Spear loosed sunsail to flank. Lyon's share prepared catapults. Euron's vessel did not flee. Instead it drifted, sails slack, as though waiting. Unease crawled like lice. As they closed, figures became visible along Silence's rail. Half-naked men, skin whiter than bone, mouths stitched shut with wire. Amid them stood a tall man clad in coat of midnight leather, one eye patched, the other blue as frozen surf. He held a twisted horn strapped in gold bands, length of a man's leg. Even at distance, its black surface shimmered with crimson runes. Euron lifted a hand in lazy salute, then raised the horn to lips. A trumpet groan poured across water, deeper than any war horn. Jon felt hairs on arms prickle. Heartwave's foremast shivered, as though struck by unseen gale. Morning Spear's sails fluttered despite stable wind. Belandra gasped, hands clutching rubies at her throat. "Dragonbinder," she whispered. The Valyrian horn said to enslave fire. A pin-drop silence followed the note. Ghost whined low. Then from Silence's deck erupted a volley of quarrels, black shafts tipped with glassy obsidian. They screamed across water like locusts. Frostfang's shields rose, half the bolts shattered on iron-rimmed oak. One slammed into a sailor's chest, dropping him before his cry left lips. Asha shouted orders. Frostfang heeled starboard to ram. Morning Spear launched scorpions, steel bolts biting into Silence's port plating, scraping sparks. Lion's share catapulted iron pots of dousing lime. But as they arced, a sudden gust burst from Silence's deck, a wall of scorching wind that flung projectiles back into sea, hissing. Euron had sorcery at his call. Boarding lines fired, grappling hooks latched. Stream shadows tore across ropes like dark spiders, blades out. Jon led charge. The distance between hulls narrowed until deck-to-deck leap felt like stepping across death's grin. Silence's deck was a nightmare tapestry. Planks stained with old blood, railposts carved into screaming faces, tongues nailed for eternity. Mute crew fought with inhuman vigor, swinging axes of black iron. Yet wolf-kraken marines met them. Arya danced among foes, needle flickering, slicing healed tendons. Bronn bellowed jokes even as his sword skewered too. Jon carved path toward Euron. The crow's eye moved leisurely, sidestepping like a man strolling through market stalls. He brandished no sword, only the horn slung by braided cord across shoulder. His laughter was a gull-ripping carrion. "Nephew of mine," he called to Asha, voice carrying unnatural clarity, "and bastard of ice. Come claim your sea." A blast of horn cut her reply. Deck lurched. Frostfang's mast snapped with crack of doom, torn by unnatural gale. Timbers screamed. Yet Heartwave, nimble, swung around Silence's stern, longship finesse, outmatching Leviathan bulk. Its prow smashed rudder chains, jarring Silence. Marines cheered. Euron's eye glittered. He drew a thin stiletto of Valyrian steel, blacker than the space between stars. Jon closed, Longclaw raised. Steel met shadow steel. Sparks flew violet. Heat pulsed from Euron's blade, singing hair. Yet Jon's years at wall and war forged him. He pressed. Duel raged amid chaos. Around them, Asha slew a mute giant with twin axes. Quentyn cut ropes to free captives found chained at mast. Bellandra crawled across deck seeking vantage with a crossbow, her borrowed weapon shaking but resolute. Euron twirled, blade kissing Jon's cheek shallow. Blood streaked cold wind. "Dragons yet sleep," he taunted, "but I will wake them, bend them. Your little fleet will roast." Jon answered with a shoulder barge, driving Euron against mast. Horn dangled. Jon slashed cord. The horn tumbled. Bellandra loosed bolt. Steel sang, and skewered the horn, pinning it to deck. A splintering shockwave rippled, as if the instrument screamed. Silence's masts groaned. The unnatural wind ceased. Euron's sneer cracked to snarl. He kicked Jon away, snatched horn handle, but Bronn's arrow pierced his forearm. The crow's eye cursed, eyes wild. Arya vaulted over fallen bodies, thrust needle into Euron's thigh. He shrieked, yet still he swung, catching her across ribs. Blood sprayed. Asha charged, heavier axe swinging. Euron parried, but momentum forced him toward rail. Ghost lunged from nowhere, white blur latching onto Euron's shoulder, jaws crunching. Off balance, the pirate lurched against barrier. Bellandra, hands slick with blood not her own, flung herself, shoulder derailing him over rail into black water. Silence quaked as if mourning. Crew faltered. Some jumped overboard. Others fell kneeling, tongues severed long ago useless to plead. Jon hauled Arya back. Blood soaked her tunic, but cut shallow. Asha spat into sea where bubbles surfaced. The drowned god can keep that one. Yet even in victory, tension coiled. The horn, though pierced, pulsed faint heat. Maester Walken later determined its magic dormant, but not dead. They sank it in 40 fathoms. Chains waited. With silent prayers, it never surfaced. Silence. Stripped of crew, towed behind Heartwave as prize. They found barrels of wildfire in hold, enough to torch half Westeros. Jon ordered the volatile cargo sealed and scuttled far offshore. News of Euron's defeat flew faster than ravens. Braavos forgave half-transport tariffs in gratitude, and Iron Bank scribes offered Jon favorable loans for lighthouse expansion. Yet shockwaves rippled south. The boy king's small council panicked at losing royal rubies. Rumors of Greyjoy civil war stirred. Some captains refusing Asha's banner, claiming Euron lived still, reborn by dark tide. Winterfell's solar hosted fierce debates. Sansa cautioned that war fatigue grew among northern farmers pressed for levy sailors. Willis Tyrell sought secured return on Reach investment. Prince Quentyn eyed Dornish independence. Jon sensed seemed straining. So he proposed a council of tides, leaders from each allied coast, to draft the Ocean Charter, a binding pact sharing sea tolls, mutual defense, and governance by weighted vote. Detractors called it folly, yet events pressed them. Storm Lord Shira Baratheon's envoys brought dire tidings. Stepstone corsairs rallying under a new commodore. Goldfang, a sell-sail-turned-slaver using Tyroshi mercenaries. Trade routes to Old Town imperiled. The charter offered united answer. The council met aboard Heartwave anchored at Tidesmeet, an islet halfway between Bear Island and Pike, where Kraken and Wolf first mingled. Canvas awnings shaded tables. Gulls squabbled overhead. A gale threatened, but Asha swore that any pact not forged in foul weather would never hold. Jon opened with speech plain yet resonant, recounting battles won and lives spared by unity. He ceded floor to each. Willis spoke of prosperity's roots. Quentyn of desert wine arriving fresh. Shira of storms best weathered with allied masts. Belandra, representing Ironbank, pledged coin flow if charter ratified. Opposition remained. Lord Ulfar Umber balked at southern tongues ruling northern keels. Lady Risa Harlaw feared Ironborn identity diluted. Yet Davos guided talks toward compromises, tithe caps, local autonomy of harbor law, equal representation. On third night of debate, Bran arrived unannounced, wheeled across rough planks by Hodor's cousin. Eyes distant, he cited ancient lore of pact of ice and fire. Long before Aegon's landing, remnant runes carved deep beneath Winterfell crypts, foretelling the day salt and snow shall chain the sea serpent's wrath. His words, half myth, half balm, soothed tensions. Even Umber fell silent. The Ocean Charter signed at dawn, ink plots trembling as wind rattled awnings. Wax seals, wolf, kraken, rose, sunspear, stag, pressed side by side. Cannons fired in salute. Horns answered. The northern Ironborn naval empire gained a backbone of law. Yet westward longing stirred still. Asha, restless, plotted next grand voyage. To chase sunsets until sunrise from other side. Jon, though bound to Winterfell's governance, felt tug. He appointed Sansa as Lord Regent of Winterfell in his absence. Her council fortified by Davos and Maester Walken. Arya took command of Stream Shadows. Bran returned to Weirwood Dreams. Preparations vast. Shipyards built 3 great carracks. Star Huntress, Boreal King, and Horizon's Mercy. With hulls, double-planked, stores for half-year. Volunteers flocked from Bear Island's hardy fisherfolk, Tyrell navigators versed in summer currents, and Dawnish marines who loved challenge. Before departure, Jon visited the crypts of Winterfell. Down stone steps he walked, torch casting shifting light on faces of kings. At Lyanna's cairn he paused, voice low. I carry our house into seas no Stark yet sailed. Guard us. He laid a wolf-carved token. He met Asha in Godswood, where red leaves whispered. She knelt at pool, surprising him with silent prayer. When she rose, eyes shone not with mockery but solemn fire. I dream of lands where kraken wolves prowl virgin shores, she said. Let us hunt the edge of maps. Departure day dawned silver. White harbor lined with thousands, even skeptics wept pride. The fleet of Discovery, Frostfang leading flanked by Heartwave and Star Huntress, spread sails woven of northern linen dyed pale blue. So from above they seemed shards of glacier adrift. They carried seeds from every allied realm, casks of fresh water, a forge kit, scrolls of law. Bran gifted Jon a carved weirwood cylinder containing raven eggs, born of trees and sky to remember home. Willis Tyrell presented rose cuttings for new gardens. Quentyn offered a vial of desert sand, So every step you take will taste of contrast. As they cut horizon, last view of north receded. Lighthouse flames, winking farewell. Cliffs capped white. Gulls followed, then turned back. Only albatross remained, silent guardians of wide emptiness. Weeks passed in rhythmic swell. Rains battered, sunscapes glistened. They charted star positions nightly, lines inked by Tyrell cartographers. They discovered clusters of islets teeming with seals, named one Ice-Kiss Cay, leaving carved markers. They skirted a storm cell swirling purple, found waterspouts dancing like dragon's breath. Mid-voyage they crossed a biting current where sea warmed. Dolphins escorted. Flying fish startled deckhands. Spirits soared. In evenings, they gathered on heart waves aft deck. Bear Islanders strummed driftwood lutes. Dornish sang of moons. Ironborn tapped syncopated rhythms on overturned barrels. John listened, memories of dark nights on wall, dissolving into starlight symphony. But the world's edge tested them soon. A vast lull of wind left ships becalmed for 10 days under blistering sun. Water rationed, tempers flared. Asha led small boats daily to fish. Quentin taught nets. Willa's navigator proposed towing ships by rowan tide. Survival turned communal. On 10th dawn, clouds massed. Thunderheads black as Urin's coat. Winds returned savage. Sails reefed. Masts groaned. Boreal King lost topgallant. Star Huntress shipped water. Yet Frostfang held course, her crew singing shanty to drown fear. Lightning speared sea, illuminating a wall of fog beyond storm. Some swore shapes moved inside, towers or trees, before gloom swallowed. When storm broke, fog lingered thick, muffling waves slap. Horn calls guided formations, lanterns flickered ghostly. They pressed forward until fog shredded, revealing coastline none had dreamed. Cliffs of green glass towering sheer, reflecting dawn so bright deckhands blinked tears. Water below glowed turquoise, steaming faint as if warmed from within. They anchored in a sheltered bay. Scouts rowed ashore. Sand crunched beneath boots like ground quartz. Strange birds shrieked crimson throats. Vegetation grew in spirals, leaves broad as shields. No sign of men. Asha claimed shore with spear planted, banner unfurled. Kraken wolf biting its tail, symbol of endless journey. They named Land Glassguard, for cliffs guarding secrets. Exploration parties fanned. Discovered freshwater pools lined with gleaming crystals, caves housing luminescent moss that glowed soft blue. Asha's naturalists captured scaled lizards luminous at dusk. Tyrell botanists exulted at spice-scented bulbs. Dornish marines found fruit tasting of sweet-peppered wine. John walked inland to a ridge. From there coastline curved wide, dotted with basalt pillars rising like sentinels. He felt hush of new world, a hum in bones. Ghost bounded, baying echo. Here, North's ice and iron met unknown heat, his two halves balanced. Yet even paradise bore shadows. On fourth day, scouts found crude stone altars by a waterfall. Stained rust, bones arranged in spiral. Signs of intelligent life, perhaps gone, or hiding. Asha kept perimeter watch. That night drums sounded beyond tree line, deep, resonant. Torches flared among vines, glimpsed then gone. Unknown watchers measured them. Council debated retreat, but consensus urged diplomacy. Next dusk John and Asha approached waterfall with small escort, unarmed, but for token blades. There by the altar stood figures, tall, copper-skinned, draped in seaweed cloth. Eyes shimmered pearl white. Their leader bore staff tipped by conch. Communication attempted, language barrier huge. Yet when John pressed hand to chest and spoke friend, the leader mirrored. Peace. Got. Through pantomime they learned this people called themselves Vegri, children of tide and fire. They revered the cliffs as birthplace of gods. Centuries prior, they warred among tribes until dragon-blood visitors came, enslaving some with sound of horn. John exchanged glance with Asha, echo of Urin's horn. The vagary feared outsiders, but recognized the kraken wolf emblem from carvings older than living memory. Prophecy of two beasts entwined, bringing balance between sea and stone. Over weeks, trust budded. Vagary guided them to volcanic terraces, where hot springs infused soil, ideal for planting Tyrell roses and northern rye alike. They traded shells of iridescent hue for iron nails and cloth. Maester Walken mapped dialect, Tyrell cartographers charted coast. Stream shadows taught spear forms to vagary youth, forging bonds. Yet not all within expedition welcomed entanglement. Some ironborn grumbled colonization risked softening raider blood. Dornish argued for immediate spice export. Willis Factor wanted land claims notarized. Jon mediated daily, feeling weight of king far from throne. One evening Bran's raven hatched in clay nest aboard Frostfang, life-bridging continents. Jon released fledgling. It circled new sky, omen of connection. Still, he sensed tension coiling future storms. Then, during reconnaissance of inland jungle, scouts found metal fragments bearing sigil of burning heart. Urlor zealots had reached even this far edge. A ruined camp held shattered horn shards reminiscent of Dragonbinder. Scorched skeletons fused to obsidian slabs. Evidence pointed to survivors of Urin's crew fleeing with twisted purpose, seeking foothold here. Jon convened leaders. Some argued evacuation, others declared stand. He chose defense. Build palisade near shore, train vagary in archery, establish beacon towers on basalt pillars. Over months, they transformed landing into first settlement. New driftwood. Houses raised from glasswood timber, roofs thatched with fire-resistant moss. Asha designed dock piers able to shelter 20 hulls. When next storm season rolled, Urlor fanatics struck, led by a man whose charred body glowed ember-like, Urin's sorcerer quartermaster. Battle erupted under green lightning. But vagary archers rained obsidian arrowheads. Waveguard marines held line. Ghost tore through zealot flank. Asha cut sorcerer's staff, releasing blasts that shook cliffs. Jon's command held. At dawn, enemy lay scattered, fire quenched by torrential rain. Victory cemented kinship. Vagary entered charter as equal coast realm, guardians of Tidefire. Settlement renamed Glassguard Haven. News carried home via Raven Cage on Star Huntress. Her captain sailing back loaded with rare spices and glowing crystal ornaments. Years unfolded. The Northern Ironborn Naval Empire became Sea's alliance, spanning old Westeros coasts and new Glassguard Haven. Lighthouses dotted routes. Every leap of waves echoed languages mingling. Children in White Harbor learned vagary words. Vagary youths carved kraken wolf totems. Jon and Asha returned to Winterfell after 3-year circuit, greeted by bells and roses. They bore new maps that bent maesters' minds, seeds that thrived in snow-soft soil, and twins, their children, Nymeria Snow Greyjoy and Torhen Greyjoy Stark, born at sea under twin moons, baptized in both seawater and melted snow. The realm roared delight. Yet, responsibilities widened. Jon established the High Admiralty Council, convening thrice yearly, once in Winterfell, once in Pike, once in Glassguard Haven, ensuring far-flung peoples felt heartbeats of rule. Sansa, aged yet resolute, guided northern landward affairs. Willis ensured trade fare. Quentin oversaw desert wine lines. Shira storm ships patrolled stepstones. Arya commanded stream shadow armada. Swift justice on waves. In time, talk turned from survival to art. Ironborn smiths forged jewelry mixing Glassguard crystals and Valyrian steel flecks. Tyrell gardeners cultivated rose-glass orchids. Music fused drum rhythms of vagary with Bear Island chants. Culture flowed like tide. When Jon walked Godswood, one crisp dawn, Bran, ever more spirit than flesh, appeared beside in thought only, voice on wind. The sea once separated men. Now it stitches them. Jon touched bark of heart tree, felt pulse of realms united. He found Asha on ramparts watching first snow. Gray streaked her hair, but eyes remained storm-bright. God, she asked, was it worth leaving shore? He answered by wrapping cloak round them both, silent but sure. In Hug's hush, they heard distant bells. Ships making port safe under network they berth. And though wars might rise, dragons wake, horns sound anew, they knew foundation laid sturdy, forged by ice and salt, tempered in green fire, anchored in hearts of peoples who learned that horizon is not border, but invitation. For as long as kraken wolf banners snapped above masts, as long as children traced lines on ever-widening maps, the northern iron-born naval empire, born of Jon Snow and Asha Greyjoy, would ride restless tide, its song a mingling of snow howl and sea roar, echoing forever across oceans to come.